Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve at sales and problem solving through process, practice, frameworks, and thinking. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. I'm really excited to have Amanda Goetz on the podcast today. We discuss intention, focus, lessons learned in building a business, joining a business, and starting over. Amanda and I first met through Twitter, and it's really exciting to take that introduction over here into the podcast. She's the VP of Marketing at The Knot and founder of something she's working on the side. Amanda, it is awesome to talk to you. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So this is pretty cool. We first met via Twitter as you were building up your Twitter audience and just kind of building all this momentum and sharing broadly everything that you're experiencing, all kinds of stuff that you were experiencing. And then all of a sudden, experience has turned into more stuff that we're all experiencing here in 2020. And now you're experiencing something completely different as you start getting back into the founder space. In addition to your day job, what drove you to kind of move back in and start building out the side business? And what was the compelling event that said, hey, I'm ready to start building again?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because if you would have asked me a year ago, I was saying very confidently, I will never be a founder again. And so I had my first company back in 2011, 2012, and it was a tech company for the wedding industry. I had managed a brand of a celebrity wedding planner for many years before that. And fun fact, I've planned over 150 weddings. So my first startup was solving a problem in the wedding space. And I basically made a lot of the decisions that you're probably not supposed to make. Like, I was a first-time female founder, non-technical, building a tech company, had no, CTO co-founder, and it was in the wedding space. So I was pitching to a lot of white men that didn't plan their own weddings and had no clue what I was talking about. So I learned a lot. Like, I equate those 3 years as my MBA. Like, I was managing engineers and building, a sales team and figuring out how to do product market fit. But it was a lot. Like, it was 3 years of just constantly like kind of hitting a wall. And it wasn't until I started getting back into, so I went to The Knot, and that was right after my company was kind of running out of steam. The founder of The Knot, Carly Roney, actually was at a female pitch night. And she was like, Amanda, come have coffee with me tomorrow. I want to talk to you. So we had coffee the next day, and she asked if I wanted to join the team and kind of lead go-to-market strategy. And this is when The Knot was transforming from a media company to a two-sided marketplace. So I got to really get in there and have my hands in a lot of cookie jars. Like, I got to build products. I got to, rebrand The Knot and really think about its repositioning strategy. But over the past 5 years, there have been things that have happened on my personal side, from getting a divorce and having 3 kids, that I became super passionate about something, about, helping women. And it got to the point where I couldn't stop thinking about this other thing and this other problem to be solved, where I couldn't ignore it any longer. And as much as I tried, I just couldn't. And so I started to just explore. And so I kept just taking it one step at a time. I'm like, okay, let's just explore to see if this is truly a problem that other women are facing. And then once I got validation about that, then I was like, well, is there a potential investor market for this? And there was. And so it was just a slow creep into it. I really tried to be hesitant, but yeah. And so I'm so thankful that my day job is supportive of women kind of, having their side hustles and taking control over what their passions are. And so, yeah, I'm kind of doing the day job and the side hustle right now.
So how do you keep things straight? Like, is there a practice or a process that you use to just kind of, because you're juggling kids, moving, motion, like all kinds of stuff. And you're transparent. If you're not following Amanda on Twitter, make sure you do so. She's extremely open in the challenges that she faces either on a day-by-day basis or the things that she's seeing on a day-by-day basis. So you're juggling kids, job, investment, new business. How do you keep track of all of that?
So I'm a very intention driven person. So I set intention for everything that I do. And I don't believe in context switching. I don't believe in massive to-do lists. I say, okay, how am I going to approach this day and what does success look like? And I ask myself that honestly every day. And there are some days that success to me looks like spending 5 hours with my kids and taking a break from screen time. Success on other days looks like my kids are in front of the TV because I really want to crank out, some things for my team. I need to focus on all things for the knot, like wedding industry is going through a lot. And so it's all about setting intention. And sometimes intention means like I get a babysitter and I go watch Netflix by myself in a room somewhere. And so that way I can like really recharge. And I don't believe in this whole thing of mommy guilt. Like I think that is this idea that we are supposed to do everything really well is just setting us all up for failure. And I believe that whatever the thing that I'm doing in this moment gets my full attention. So I'm putting my phone away if I'm with my kids. Anything can wait. I'm not doing anything that's, saving lives. But if I'm on, a podcast with you, I have my phone off, like I'm not looking at anything so that way I can be fully present. And so I think it's the two things of just setting intention and then removing guilt and knowing that you're doing the most with the time that you have in front of you. And I have this phrase called focus and finish. Like every morning I have a 2-hour block of time and I do think about like my optimal times and when I do my best thinking time and get like pushing projects forward. But I wake up every morning and I have that like optimal time where there are usually only 2 things that I want to focus and finish. And those are things that are usually annoying, that are bigger, that it takes me a lot longer to move forward, usually like a deck for work that I want to communicate thoughts. And honestly, I think many people today think of their inbox as their work. And I always think about it. I was a basketball player growing up, so I always use offense and defense, but your defense is your email. Like you do not have the ball. You are going whatever way the person with the ball is, right? And so you are on defense. Offense is when you're in control and you get to say, what is the thing that has the most impact? And to go back to your question of like, how do I juggle it all? Or I think about what's going to have the most impact and spend my time on that. If it is a high level of effort, but a low level of impact, I don't do it. And I also believe that not every email needs an immediate response. There are certain emails that do, but like I'm not on defense 100% of the time and nobody should be. And so how do you take back kind of that control?
Yep. So how did you how did you start to get comfortable with saying no to things? Because as you're talking about this, like the email is defense, and now we've got email and Slack and direct messages and all these other areas where people can continue to just feed noise into the machine. And then there's this other side of it. And I really like looking at it in this context, this offense versus defense. I happen to be a football guy, so then you think of special teams too. And now you've got 3 different components. But as you go through this, what was the thing or what has really helped you? And I know you talked about intention as you started this and setting intention. How did you get comfortable with saying no to certain things, compartmentalizing and being able to focus the attention on the things that matter rather than all of the other stuff?
So I believe that in the absence of information is when people get anxiety, right? I mean, that's like the TLDR of like my entire life right now. Like, what the heck is happening with school this fall? But regardless, in the absence of information, people spin and they ask a lot of questions. And so I believe in proactive communication. Mm-hmm. We do this thing, especially, and this picked up even more during COVID, where I'm sending a Monday email and a Friday email to my department at the Knot. The Monday email is, what are the 5 things we need to focus on as a team this week? And how do we define success? Like, what are we goaling ourselves? And a reminder of what goals we're actually using to measure success. So if everybody knows what the end goal is and how it's defined as success, that frees up the need to ask 1,000 questions. And so what I have found is when people don't have clear North Star, they don't know what they're marching towards, they don't know what their individual role, how their work ladders up to those like company-wide or department-wide or team-wide goals, that's when you get unnecessary emails, you get a lot of Slack messages, and then DRI ship. So DRI we use as a term, directly responsible individual. If you've ever been in a meeting and you're like, talk about a lot of stuff and you're like, well, great, this was great. Everybody we'll catch up next week or whatever. And you have no clue who actually has the ball. That's a problem. And so clear goals, a clear strategy, and then a clear owner allow everybody to send so many less messages. It's amazing what just those three things will do. And as long as they have those tools, then they don't need as much from me during the week. So to kind of like summarize this, the more proactive work you can do, the less reactive work you get.
Yep. It's awesome. And what I really like is the simplified approach to this, where your goal strategy owner, clarity and communication, removing gaps that allow people to kind of fill in the blanks and come up with their own story. And the piece that really resonated with me is this idea of it's through this void or lack of communication, lack of certainty, where anxiety really starts to amplify. And now you've got a lot of people worrying about a lot of things, whether they can control those things or have influence on those things or are completely out of it. So this is awesome. I do want to get into a discussion around lessons learned. So you had your first startup, and now you've got this new one that you're propping up. Now, your first startup, am I right? Did you bootstrap that?
Yes. Yeah.
Why'd you bootstrap?
Because I couldn't raise. Like that is the actual honest answer. I like beg, borrowed, and steal. Like I am not from a wealthy family. I grew up like my dad is a plumber and like I'm a first generation college grad. Like I don't have just like people I can ask for money. I don't know how people just have these phone calls. Like, but no, honestly, the true answer is it was a tech company. I needed more engineers. I needed more capital, but it was a time when I was a first-time female founder, non-technical, didn't have a CTO, and I was pitching a wedding company. And so it was really hard to pitch a lot of men on a company that they didn't feel the pain points of because they didn't plan their own weddings. And so you start to see the shift happening now in the founder landscape where there are more women on the investment teams that, and you pitch everybody, but like once you have somebody on the investment team that can kind of validate the hypothesis that this is actually a pain point, it helps to kind of create a little bit of confidence when they don't know it as well.
Yep. So let's talk about that shift to now. So current state, you've actually chosen to go out and you're seeking investment, or you've already sought investment, and you shared some stuff today even, and I'm kind of dating this. We're recording on the 13th of July. This will go live probably sometime toward the end of July, early part of August. And I'll put a link to the tweet stream. But you decided to go out and raise this time. What was it that compelled you to go out and raise this time?
So for me, it was the fact that there are some really brilliant people out there as angels that have expertise in things that I would love to have as I build from 0 to 1. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of people that are successful on Kickstarter and getting support that way, which is definitely like those crowdfunding platforms are viable options. And I think that it builds a really great buzz and community. But for me, when I'm thinking about where I want this to potentially go, having some of these early stage investors who have been down that path before, and going back to your initial question of like lessons learned and experience, I wholeheartedly believe that experience is the best teacher. Like if you can read all you want, but the second you apply it, you're going to understand how your application was interpreted. Like I am not the same as the person that wrote that book. And so the people that respond to me are different than the person that got responses when they tried it that way. And so you have to actually do applications of these things And I believe that finding more people, and to me, I learn by like sharing my shared experiences with other people and hearing how they're, and then it's pattern recognition. And so the more and more angel investors or founders that are a part of you, or VCs, like a lot of VCs that are very founder friendly, the reason you bring them on board is pattern recognition. They know, okay, I've seen this 10 times, 8 of the times it played out this way, 2 times it played out this way. So like, here's my advice. That's why I chose to fundraise.
So it's not only about the money, it's also about the insight and the experience and the perspective and just what they've seen, the access, the scale that they've been able to see things.
Exactly. Yeah. I was doing a mentorship program for this like accelerator program. And a woman said to me, she's like, I don't even care. I'm just going to take dumb money right now. I was like, wait a second. Let's talk about that. What do you mean dumb money? And she's like, I just need their money. And I'm like, investors are like a relationship. That person is going to be a part of your life for potentially like what's the average life cycle is like, 5 to 7 years or something. This is not just about a check. This is about a relationship. And if you don't know if that's a good fit, if they're going to be there for you in the ups and the downs, like, let's like take a step back and really think about this. It's not just about the check.
It's fascinating when people like there's this belief of what it is, and then there's this reality of what it is, not only for you, but for the operating environment that you're in. And until you actually get in that operating environment, you can't really describe it. You don't know functionally how all of the pieces will come together in your experience. You might be able to describe it. Like I could read a book on basketball and describe what should happen, but I cannot describe what it feels like to make that thing happen. And
you can't teach empathy. Like you can't learn empathy. So when I managed a team of engineers and then went to the Knot, and I was, in rooms with the product teams and the engineers, and I could actually empathize with why they needed to t-shirt size something, how to communicate bug fixes, and how can I make their lives a little bit easier. That's the part you can't teach from a book, because you have to actually be working side by side with somebody to see what they're feeling and what stressors they have. Like, yes, I could have read like, this is what an eng lead does. Great, I now know tactically, but I don't understand like what those fire drills are, or how many asks they get, or why they want to understand the marketing strategy so they can, feel like they're working towards a bigger picture. Like all these things that are more the feelings behind the role than just the role itself. So I totally agree. You can't teach that sentiment.
So let's talk about the relationship side of things. So, like we talked a little bit earlier about being able to say no to things. What about saying no to people? Like, even though, hey, I've got this money, I want to invest in your organization because I believe in what you're doing, but I'm just not the right fit for you. Whether or not I think I'm the right fit, that I'm not the right fit just because of any number of things that you've identified. How do you go through the process of saying no to people, and why is that important?
So it's a good question. I mean, in today's world, when, especially as you start to build like a following, you want to be able to help everyone. And that's a hard part. Like that's a separate issue of just trying to answer everybody's DMs and like be there for people genuinely. Cause I do believe in genuine connection. But when it comes to like saying no to business relationships, I think a lot about where it needs to start. And it needs to start with just knowing yourself. And I think where a lot of bad relationships happen, both personally and professionally, is you have no clue what your boundaries are and what you need in a relationship. And the same goes for a founder. Like, what are your needs? And so I made a very concerted effort before I started fundraising to understand what kind of buckets of investors I was looking for, what different needs that they could solve, and then what were just different characteristics. Like, I am a very lead by transparency, lead by vulnerability. And if I ever felt uncomfortable telling somebody about like my kids or like a struggle I was facing, if I had to feel like I had to put on a front to be something for that other person to me, that was a red flag inside of myself that this is not the type of relationship that I would want. But a person that immediately like connected on an emotional level, and I felt like I could call them when times got hard, that's what I was looking for. And that ultimately is the types of investors that I went with.
Yeah. And times will get hard. Like they're just inevitable. So they're going to get hard. So how do you deal with the pain? Like what's your process for dealing with kind of the pain and the conflict and the challenges that will come up, the storms that will come up?
Yeah. I mean, building just in general, there's ups and downs, right? And I believe like I am not a like middle ground person. Like I ride the highs and I ride the lows. So remembering that in those high moments, especially in the early days, like the littlest things, like an email from somebody, like getting an email back from like your dream investor or whatever, that is like an extreme high and you're floating on that. And I just use those like moments to remind myself, like, this is why I'm doing this, because this is so fun. And then in the lows, you remember, okay, this is not that low. And then you have to remind yourself to take a step back, because I think it's really hard when you're building to lose the forest through the trees and to tie your identity to it. And so taking the growth mindset approach of my first startup failed miserably, like it did. And yet I can talk about how much I learned. And so I just am like, okay, I want this one to succeed, like for many reasons, because I truly believe in it. But if it fails, like I'm still learning and growing, and it's not going to change like who I am and the trajectory I'm on. So I think a lot of people tie themselves to the identity of the thing that they're building, which makes it also hard to iterate down the line. But yeah, I think it's okay to acknowledge like highs and lows and talk about those openly, because everybody experiences them.
Yeah, so given that we know that everybody experiences them, like all of us have had some kind of relationship that's gone south. All of us have worked for a bad boss at one point in time, I would imagine. All of us have had a day that's just been a crappy day. Why do we struggle with talking about this? I mean, I remember when all of what we've got going on with COVID started happening, the joke was if you looked at Twitter, it was the end of the world. And if you looked at Instagram, everybody was on spring break. But why is it that we struggle with this level of transparency and authenticity, even when we know that everybody else is dealing with some kind of struggle on their own?
Someone has to go first. And that is the thing that I've learned. Like someone has to be brave enough to go first. And that is like the thing that I've found on Twitter is that the reason I have so many women following me, like I'm pretty sure my following is like 90% women or something crazy, but is because I speak very openly about my struggles with infertility or like freezing my eggs or going through a divorce and how hard it is and just like parenting struggles, because my entire life. So I had a really close friend many years ago and I had a miscarriage, and I remember just being like, really bummed and like really sad and mourning that. And I shared that with her, and she was like, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing 4 months ago. And I was like, how did I not know that? And the fact that she was sharing that with me made me feel so less alone, right? Like we all want to feel not alone in our own struggles, but it took me saying it first, not her, because she was not open. And so I've really taken that to heart, and just in life and also as a leader, like acknowledging right now that I'm also burnt out. Like we have been working more hours than we have ever before, just because like we are all trying to keep like our businesses going, and we're supporting a lot of small businesses at the Knot and making sure that like we're helping shepherd the industry. And so the first and foremost thing that I do with my team is be like, I'm either having a good week or a bad week. Like guys, this has been a rough week for me. I'm just going to fully acknowledge that. And I will say, I'm going to log off early on Friday because I'm feeling pretty burnt out. And I feel like my brain is at capacity. And going first, especially when you're in a leadership position, helps other people to follow. And then that creates this foundation of trust and further vulnerability that you can't recreate without going first. Someone has to go first.
really like the idea that you're talking about here and the importance of going first. And I think this is a good transition into community and the value of community. What does community mean to you?
So, community means to me people who found connection through usually highs or lows. And so, to break that down a little further, I hate the phrase misery loves company because I actually think I view relationships as like two bottles of water, and one sometimes is like empty and the other one has to like fill into the other one. And sometimes you're both kind of half full. You can't have two empty bottles because that really struggles when everybody's emotionally depleted. But when you find connection, that's authentic. And you can connect through things that are just like life experiences. Twitter has been an incredible thing for me because the more I share, the more I'll get DMs from women who are like, hey, I'm going through this too. Like, can we talk? And I'll send them my phone number and we'll jump on the phone at 9 o'clock at night and she'll share like her divorce or what she's going through. And to me, community is about meaningful connection. Like brands that try to be everything to everyone end up being nothing to like literally anyone. So I think just being true to who you are and connecting with people in an authentic way is like the foundation.
Do you believe there's a community for everyone?
Yes. Like when I talk to people about like personal branding or like how they should approach their social media channels, it's like, listen, if you want to talk about fly fishing all day, every day, eventually you're going to find other people that love fly fishing. And then you guys can talk about all the things that I don't even know how to continue on this analogy because I don't know anything about fly fishing, but like you'll find your group and feel like you have a safe place to talk about the thing that no one else wants to hear you talk about because they don't care. And that's what it is. Like that to me is the importance of social media. Like to your point about the people that were acting like nothing was going on, like they're the ones that are going to start to feel alone because they're not meaningfully connecting with people. I haven't felt alone in this whole thing because once I share like, holy crap, homeschooling is really hard. Like, what the heck are we doing here? And then I see all these other parents that are like, I don't want to do this either. They're like, okay, good. I'm not alone. I'm not a horrible parent.
It is. I mean, I know you said misery loves company and how you don't like that phrase. I mean, there's another phrase is something to the effect of how people can come together never underestimate how people can come together when there's a common enemy.
Yes.
And we've seen this happen. When airplanes were flown into buildings at 9/11, this country came together in a way that it had not come together in years. And now we're in an environment where we've got so many different things going on. We're so divided because we're all chasing after different enemies. And I don't know if we need, Will Smith and aliens and Independence Day, and we're a little bit after that, but where that comes together as the common enemy that brings everybody back together. But it's just, we all have things. Like if there's something out there that you really enjoy. I mean, I'm a Jets fan. It's long suffering. They haven't won a Super Bowl since I've been alive. There are other Jets fans that are out there in the world. And, there are actually Jets fans who like barbecue and like driving Jeeps and maybe are interested in education technology and learning and development. And if you put yourself out there the way that Amanda described, you can find people or they'll find you because they're looking for this same thing. And that's it. For me, there's so much value in community, whether it's an HR community, like some of the Twitter chats that I'll get involved in, or it's marketing communities or whatever, startup community. There are communities where you can have this common ground. Think about how book clubs, people get excited about book clubs. They come together reading about a book. Or heck, I mean, we're going to wait for HBO to release whatever new series they're going to release, and we can all start talking about Game of Thrones or whatever the next iteration of that is. So as we wrap things up, one of the other pieces that you talked about in your Twitter stream was hype it up. So let's end things on a really positive note. We talked about the negative of, hey, we've all got something we're dealing with, and let's come together as a community. Now let's talk about hyping it up, because there's no way to end a podcast on the New York Jets. At least it wouldn't end well.
Yeah. Okay. We'll end it on a high note here. So 2 things about hype it up. One, I don't know where this like philosophy of like you shouldn't talk about your successes. And I could dive into like feminist society and like all these things, but I'll save that for a different podcast. But I spent a year really thinking about how to put myself out there, because they say like in early stage investing, right, you're betting on the jockey, not the horse, or, you know, more so the jockey than the horse. And if people don't know what you stand for or what you're passionate about, or just like putting out your intelligence and how you think about things, that's so important. And we have all of these tools to do it, whether you are comfortable on camera and doing live streams or whatever, or just getting on Twitter and just like engaging in really intellectual conversation, like putting yourself out there and then taking those meetings. So I think about hype it up in one, like hyping yourself up, like you are obviously doing something that you're passionate about. Share that with people, share with how you think about the world. And then the second piece is, before I launched my company, I strategically thought through like sending a big news update to my like CRM, right? And getting people excited that there's momentum before you hit them up to ask them if they're interested in being a part of it. When you think about the buzz that you can create by timing something appropriately, so sending out a company email and being like, hey, and we did this, and this week, we're rocking and rolling, we've got great momentum. And then the next day you're like, oh, hey, did you still want to like get on board with this? You time that perfectly to say you're riding that momentum wave. And the more and more people that you can talk to or send those emails to around the same time, like you get that ripple effect. And so just to summarize, like, don't be afraid to hype yourself up. Like, you are intelligent and should share your viewpoints with the world. And then 2, be strategic about when you're going to make an ask of someone, make it easy for them to say yes.
So what about the person out there who says, you know what, I just don't want to promote myself. I don't want to be self-promotional. What if there's that bias that they have, or they're just hung up on that? How do they overcome that piece?
So I think self-promotion is very different than stating your thoughts.
Okay.
Right? Sharing your thoughts about how you think about a marketing campaign, or how you think about, you know, this new tech platform. That's not self-promotion. That is just putting your thoughts into the world. I definitely don't believe in the humble brag. Like, you should be able to say, I'm so excited that I raised capital for my company and we are rocking and rolling, and I'm so excited of what we're doing. To me, that's not bragging. That is putting out into the world what you're doing and that you're excited about it. People that are very self-promotional, you feel that immensely, like you feel that right away. What I'm talking about is putting your thoughts into the world, because that's where people will be like, oh, I love how that person thinks about something. And wow, I want to pick their brain. And that leads to a new conversation. And so you got to start somewhere. Again, it kind of goes back to the, like, you got to go first, and you've got to bet on yourself before other people will, and really take the time to invest and put yourself out there.
Yeah, I really like that distinction between sharing your thoughts and putting your thoughts out in the world versus doing the self-promotion, and that those are 2 distinctly different things.
Very different things. I think people associate like having a lot of followers with being like trying to be a lot of followers. The fact of the matter is, like, I did not, like 100% did not set out on Twitter followers. I was on Twitter to share my thoughts and start to engage with other people who maybe had competing thoughts or had new thoughts that I hadn't thought about. And to me, it was all about growth. And so those are very distinct things. And I think anybody who's I would ask them to really like look inside and be like, is this imposter syndrome? And do I not feel like my thoughts are worth sharing to the public versus putting someone else down for doing it, you know?
Yep. Amanda, this has been awesome. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and follow you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Twitter these days. So Amanda M. Goetz, Goetz. And I'll definitely be sharing in the next few weeks what I'm working on.
Please check out Amanda's work. She's an awesome follow on Twitter. She's starting to do more stuff on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow her and engage with her. If you know of someone who'd benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them and let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you're applying the lessons learned, concepts discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?